The figure displayed on your savings account statement isn't lying to you, but it isn't telling you the full truth either. The balance itself is technically correct. What's wrong is the interpretation your brain automatically applies to it. You glance at the statement, notice the number climbed, and somewhere in your mind a quiet signal fires. Progress. I'm handling my finances properly. But your financial institution understands something you've likely never been shown. A balance growing at a rate slower than inflation is, in terms of actual purchasing power, functionally identical to a balance that's shrinking. It is, in every meaningful sense, a balance that's shrinking. And by the time this video wraps up, you'll recognize that the most foundational financial guidance most people receive, earn less than you spend, set money aside, allow compounding to work, was constructed around financial products deliberately engineered to generate profit for others, including the very individuals who handed you that advice to begin with. Here's the central argument. The standard financial guidance most people absorb throughout their lives isn't fraudulent, but it was constructed around institutions and products that profit directly from your obedience to it. Compound interest functions, but it functions for your bank before it functions for you. I'm going to walk you through 4 specific mechanisms that prove this, using real figures, verifiable mathematics cross-referenced against credible sources, and concrete examples rather than abstract theory. Let's establish the framework first. The mental image I want anchored in your mind throughout everything that follows is a vending machine. You insert money. You anticipate receiving something valuable in return. The machine retains the majority of the energy, returns something considerably smaller than your input, and collects a fee for doing so. Everything covered in this video is ultimately a variation of one fundamental question. At what point did you conclude the machine was designed to serve you? Shortly, I'll show you exactly what 3 decades inside the machine looks like, with specific dollar figures attached. But first, let me walk you through the quietest and most refined version of the machine, the one currently running on the money you feel most confident about protecting. There exists within the American retirement system a fee structure that is technically disclosed to participants but almost never genuinely understood by them. A median income household with 2 earners contributing consistently to retirement accounts across an entire working career will surrender approximately $155,000 in fees across their lifetime. This figure comes from research published by the policy organization Demos, not from poor investment decisions, not from market downturns, but from fees. Fees that were disclosed somewhere within a 70-page plan document that virtually no one read, and that the majority of participants don't even realize exist. A Government Accountability Office survey revealed that 41% of Americans are entirely unaware they pay any 401k fees whatsoever. Not indifferent to those fees, genuinely unaware they exist. Here's how the mechanism operates. You contribute to your 401k. Those contributions flow into mutual funds held within the plan. Those mutual funds charge what's known as an expense ratio, a percentage of your total assets extracted every single year to cover fund management, administration, and marketing costs. According to Demos, the median expense ratio for plans with fewer than 100 participants sits at 1.29% annually. For large plans exceeding 10,000 participants, that figure drops to 0.43%. The smaller your employer, the higher your cost. That's the architecture of the system. Now let's translate the numbers into plain terms. Analysis from PensionBee drawing on Pew. Charitable Trust Research demonstrates that a 1% annual fee differential reduces a retirement account balance by 30% over a 40-year period compared to a lower-cost alternative. 30%. Make that tangible. Picture 2 colleagues, identical salary, identical contribution rate, identical gross investment returns. The first worker is enrolled in a plan carrying 0.5% in total annual fees. The second is in a plan charging 1.5%. After 30 years at a 7% gross return, per Pocket Guard's fee modeling, the first worker exits with $574,000. The second worker leaves with $432,000. The difference is $142,000. That money didn't disappear into thin air. It was transferred, legally, contractually, to plan administrators and fund managers. The machine captures the real return. But there's an additional layer most participants never discover. The issue isn't even that the fees are extraordinarily elevated. It's that the individuals who determine which funds appear in your 401k menu have a financial incentive to favor expensive options. The mechanism behind this is called revenue sharing. When a fund company seeks inclusion in a 401k plan, it sometimes pays the plan administrator a share of its management fee, classified as a 12B-1 fee or a shareholder servicing fee. The pricier the fund, the larger the payment flowing back to the administrator. And since plan administrators aren't legally required under current regulation to act strictly in participants' best financial interests when assembling the fund menu, only to meet the law's standard of being prudent, the expensive funds remain on the list. This isn't fraud, it's incentive alignment. The machine isn't malfunctioning, the machine is performing precisely as it was engineered to perform. You simply aren't its primary beneficiary. Stay engaged, because what comes next reframes everything. The 401k fee problem is infuriating on its own, but it's actually the secondary issue. The larger problem involves what most people do with the money they don't direct toward retirement savings. Right now, as of July 2026, the national average interest rate on savings accounts is 0.61% per year, according to a bank rate survey covering more than 500 financial institutions. That's the average across the entire banking system. One major national bank's standard savings account pays 0.01% APY per NerdWallet. Data from mid-2025. That's $1 annually on a $10,000 balance. $1. You could find loose change in a parking lot and outperform that savings account for the entire year. And yet, Americans collectively hold approximately $11 trillion in savings and checkable deposit accounts, per Statista figures. Now introduce inflation into the equation. As of May 2026, inflation was running at approximately 2.7%, according to FDIC and U.S. News reporting on Bureau of Labor Statistics data. Average savings rate, 0.61%. Inflation rate, 2.7%. Real return, negative 2.1% annually on every dollar you're dutifully setting aside. The number on your statement increases. Your actual purchasing power in the real economy declines. The machine takes the real return. Here's an illustration to make it concrete. Consider a man. Call him Gerald. Gerald followed every instruction he was given. Every time a financial publication told him to establish a 6-month emergency reserve, Gerald built one. He deposited $40,000 into a savings account at his local brick-and-mortar bank. The one with the recognizable logo, the approachable branch manager, and the branded foam coffee cup sitting on the service counter. And he left that money untouched for 10 years. In nominal terms, Gerald earned roughly $4,500 in interest across that decade. He felt responsible. He felt financially secure. He told people he'd built a solid emergency cushion. But in real terms, adjusted for the average inflation rate across that same 10-year span, Gerald's $40,000 lost approximately $6,000 to $7,000 in purchasing power. He emerged a full decade later with less capacity to purchase goods and services than when he started. He had done precisely what he was told. He executed the advice flawlessly. He moved backward. You might be tempted to conclude that Gerald simply didn't save enough. That's the surface-level interpretation. But Gerald's problem had nothing to do with the quantity of money he set aside. Gerald's problem was the vehicle he used. A savings account functions appropriately as an emergency buffer. It was always marketed as the cornerstone of financial security, but it is mathematically incapable of building genuine wealth across time when inflation consistently outpaces its yield, which historically describes the vast majority of economic environments. That distinction between the tool suited for emergencies and the tool capable of building real wealth is one that almost nobody articulates clearly, because the institution best positioned to explain it to you is the same institution profiting from selling you the savings account. Here's what creates the most psychological disruption. The savings account feels secure precisely because the nominal figure never declines. Your bank statement never informs you that your purchasing power decreased by 2.1% this year. Instead, it reports that your balance is $42,000, up from $40,000. Your brain registers advancement. It does not automatically register an inflation-adjusted loss. The bank statement is structured to present the number that generates a positive feeling, because feeling positive means you remain. You don't transfer to a high-yield account. You don't ask uncomfortable questions. You don't move the money elsewhere. The machine is elegant, and the machine takes the real return. Let's frame this across a 30-year window, because that's the timeline that genuinely matters. If you're currently between the ages of 30 and 55, consider this. Take $100,000 and place it in a savings account, earning 2% annually, which is generous relative to the current national average, but let's be generous. After 30 years, you have approximately $182,000 per Cash Sprouts modeling. Now take that same $100,000 and place it in an S&P 500 index fund. According to Fidelity, the S&P 500 averaged a 30-year return of 10.4% annually from January 1996 through December 2025. At that rate, after 30 years, your $100,000 grows to approximately $1.7 million. The gap between those two decisions, same individual, same discipline, same starting capital, is roughly $1.5 million. That's not a sales pitch for any financial product. That's compound mathematics. And the difference between the machine that delivers that outcome and the machine that doesn't is the single most consequential financial decision most people are currently not making with clear understanding. If you find this content valuable, consider subscribing. Otherwise, the platform's recommendation system may not surface future videos to you. Most financial commentary concludes the argument at this point. Fees are harmful, index funds are superior, savings accounts belong exclusively in the emergency fund category. And that's accurate as far as it extends. But it doesn't address the genuinely important question. If this is so obvious, if the mathematics are this unambiguous, why do 42% of Americans hold less than $1,000 in total savings, according to Zippia's 2025 research? Why do 54% of American households carry no dedicated retirement savings at all, according to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances? Why does the median retirement balance for workers aged 55 to 64 sit at $185,000 according to Federal Reserve data, confirmed by Kiplinger's 2026 analysis, when the amount Americans report needing to retire comfortably is $1.46 million? Why is that gap so staggering? The answer is where this video becomes genuinely interesting. Here's the dimension that never appears in a standard retirement calculator, and frankly, it barely surfaces in mainstream financial advice discussions at all. You understand the math. The gap between the national average savings rate of 0.61% and a 30-year broad market index return is approximately 9 to 10 percentage points, compounding annually. That differential over time represents the distance between a comfortable departure from the workforce and spending your 60s performing financial calculations you genuinely don't want to be doing. But comprehending the gap and having a functioning system to close it are two entirely distinct challenges. Most people who understand the numbers still haven't constructed the framework around them. There's a resource called the Exit Code, built specifically to address this. It's 8 chapters of analysis grounded in 50 years of retirement data. The genuine mathematics of exiting the workforce, not the inspirational interpretation of it. Based on what we've been discussing, 2 elements from that material are particularly relevant here. The first is what I refer to as the 4% trap. The 4% withdrawal rule, the concept that you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually in retirement without depleting it, was derived from research conducted in the 1990s using a specific sequence of historical market returns and assuming a 30-year retirement horizon. If you retire at 55 and live to 90, You're managing a 35-year runway. The original math breaks down. The dynamic withdrawal method outlined in that resource adjusts your withdrawal rate based on actual current market conditions rather than a static percentage, calibrated against historical data. That approach has extended portfolio longevity by 7 to 12 years, meaning the difference between exhausting your savings at 76 and remaining financially stable through age 88. The second is a specific portfolio allocation constructed on 50 years of actual return data that has historically outperformed actively managed funds across 30-year windows. Not by identifying winning investments, by getting the structural composition correct and then leaving it undisturbed. Every year, the compounding gap on this approach goes unaddressed as a year of real wealth that cannot be recovered. That resource is available through the link in the description for less than the cost of a restaurant dinner. No filler. 8 chapters, pure research-backed analysis. If you're somewhere in your 40s or 50s and your retirement plan currently resembles a feeling rather than a specific number, it converts that feeling into a defined date and a defined target. That's the only form of retirement planning that actually produces results. Remember Gerald? He eventually sat across a table from a financial professional who told him something that initially sounded incorrect, but proved to be entirely accurate. Gerald, you don't have a savings problem. You have a vehicle problem. Gerald had spent 30 years executing the behavioral component correctly, consistently setting money aside, never withdrawing it, resisting the lifestyle inflation that derails most people. He had done all of that, and then directed that money into the machine that takes the real return, because no one had ever explained that discipline and vehicle selection are two independent variables, and both must be correct simultaneously. What nobody had told Gerald, and what I want to articulate with complete precision, is that money operates across 3 distinct levels of growth. Level 1 is preservation, keeping the nominal figure stable, preventing the face value from declining. That's what a savings account provides. Level 2 is pace, keeping up with inflation, not falling behind in real purchasing power. That requires a return exceeding the inflation rate. A high-yield savings account at minimum, or short-duration bonds or certificates of deposit. Level 3 is growth, genuinely increasing your real wealth across time in a manner that outpaces inflation by several percentage points. That requires assets that compound in real terms. Broadly diversified equities, cash-flowing real estate, or some deliberate combination of both. The difficulty is that nearly every piece of financial guidance directed at ordinary individuals targets level 1 and presents it as the pinnacle of financial responsibility. Level 1 is the floor. The floor is not the destination. Here's something that most people in this conversation find quietly unsettling when they first encounter it. Consider who produces the financial literacy curriculum that reaches most American children. Banks aren't merely permitted to fund and design financial education programs in schools. They're actively encouraged to do so and can receive regulatory credit for participating. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency explicitly states that banks providing support for in-school financial literacy initiatives can qualify for Community Reinvestment Act consideration. The American Bankers Association operates a national initiative called Teach Children to Save. In 2025 alone, more than 11,000 bank volunteers representing nearly 500 institutions participated in financial education events for students in kindergarten through 8th grade. The Treasury Secretary that year recorded a video specifically intended to be shown during these presentations. None of this is concealed. Now consider the incentive structure woven into the curriculum itself. Who teaches children about savings accounts? The institutions that generate profit from holding deposits. Who demonstrates how compound interest functions using a savings account as the primary example? The institution's currently paying 0.38% on those same deposits, while lending that money out at 7% on automobile loans and 18% on credit card balances. Who designs lesson plans on responsible financial habits? The same entities charging up to $12 per month in maintenance fees on the very accounts those responsible habits are supposed to support. The lesson content isn't false, it's simply weighted heavily toward the tools that generate revenue for the institutions financing the lesson. This isn't a coordinated conspiracy, it's systems thinking. Follow the incentives, and the incentives describe the curriculum. The machine doesn't run only inside your bank. It runs inside your middle school personal finance class. The outcomes are measurable. A 2025 assessment found that only 49% of U.S. adults could demonstrate basic financial literacy, according to the National Association of State Boards of Education. Barely half the country can answer fundamental questions about how money actually functions, and the institutions best positioned to close that gap. The ones holding the financial resources, the media platforms, and the established school relationships are precisely the ones that structurally benefit from the gap remaining open. I'm not outraged by this. I'm genuinely fascinated by it. The way you might be captivated by a mechanical watch that has been running flawlessly for a century. The machine is elegant, and the machine takes the real return. Here's what the machine ultimately operates on at its foundation. The conventional financial system doesn't keep people in a disadvantaged wealth position through outright deception. It does so through two psychological mechanisms so effective that most people never recognize them operating. The first is nominal illusion. When your savings account balance climbs from $40,000 to $42,000, your brain interprets that as progress. It observes a number increasing and releases a small reward response. It doesn't automatically calculate that inflation eroded 2.7% of the actual real value. The bank statement is structured to display the nominal figure because the nominal figure generates a positive emotional response. And a positive emotional response means you remain. You don't transfer funds to a high-yield account. You don't redirect money into an index fund. You don't review the fee disclosure document. The machine maintains its users because the output feels like success. Having spent more than a decade operating a business surrounded by accountants and fiscal advisors who demonstrated how money actually moves, the moment that fundamentally shifted my understanding of all of this was the first time I compared what a fee schedule actually stated against what I had assumed it stated. The discrepancy between the two wasn't minor. The machine had been running the entire time. I simply hadn't been tracking what it was producing. The second mechanism is loss aversion. Keeping money in a savings account feels safe because the nominal number never visibly decreases. Transferring it into an index fund feels risky because the balance might drop on a difficult market day. What the brain doesn't naturally factor in is that the savings account is delivering a guaranteed real loss every single year. Your brain is selecting a certain gradual loss over a volatile but potentially substantial gain. That's not rational in the mathematical sense, but it is profoundly human. The vending machine isn't purely a financial structure, it's a psychological structure. It's engineered to feel equitable. It's engineered to feel protective. The comfort it generates is genuine. The return it generates is not. Here's a case study that illustrates the cost with clarity. During the financial crisis of 2008 and early 2009, the S&P 500 declined approximately 50% from its 2007 peak. It was genuinely alarming, and a substantial portion of American investors responded by liquidating market positions and moving the proceeds into savings accounts and cash-equivalent instruments. That felt rational in the moment. It felt like responsible risk management. What it actually accomplished was locking in the loss permanently. The market reached its lowest point in March 2009. By 2013, it had fully recovered to pre-crisis levels. By 2017, it had more than doubled from the 2009 floor. The investors who remained in the market, or who added to their positions during the decline, were made whole and then rewarded beyond that. The investors who retreated to savings accounts missed the most powerful recovery period in recent market history. They fed the machine that takes the real return at precisely the moment the machine would have delivered extraordinary gains to them instead. At this point, you might be thinking, fine, index funds over savings accounts? Understood. But that's the surface conclusion, and I want to go considerably deeper.